Thank you for joining us. This is Brave New History. I'm here with Tad Reeves. He runs the Scientology parent blog. And yeah, you'll see him, does interviews for Scientology parenting. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot.
Yeah, and did I do a good job interviewing you or introducing you?
You
Anything
did.
else you'd want to add?
Sure. So, I guess I could just kind of dive into that a little bit. So yes, I'm a Scientologist. I run the Scientology parent blog and have for the last 15 years or so, basically ever since I first had kids. So it gives you an idea about how old my oldest is. I got 3 kids. I've been in Scientology my whole life, and grew up in a Scientology family. My mom got into Scientology about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, before I was born. And then she had family before that were involved. So you can say, depending on how you want to look at it, I'm either a second or third generation Scientologist. But yeah, I've been all over the Scientology world, done a whole bunch of stuff, and pretty hooked into the Scientology community, and active a lot on Twitter. It's where I spend most of my time online these days, interacting with folks, answering questions and stuff. And I'm happy to answer any questions you got.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. And are there any orgs in Georgia? You're in Georgia, right?
So yeah, I'm in Georgia. I'm at the very tippity top of Georgia. I'm right underneath Chattanooga. So I'm in the very last town before the Tennessee border. So I'm about in I wouldn't call it a no man's land of that, but I'm about 2 hours from Nashville and 2 hours from Atlanta, which are my closest churches of Scientology.
Got it. All right. So what does Scientology, how has that informed your parenting? And like what kind of parts of the tech, as they say, have you?
Well, I could go into a lot on that. I guess one thing I
Yeah.
should probably clarify first is a bit of what it really is, because then you can kind of talk about how
Ah,
it's used.
yeah.
And because the entire thing is, so it's an applied religious philosophy, and it's religious in the fact that it deals with the individual as an individual, and treats the individual as a spirit. It's a philosophy that is meant to be used. It's not just something that's kind of meant to be studied or believed solely on belief, or parroted, or just kind of, I guess, just venerated or worshipped in the traditional sense. It's really it's a series of things that you would learn and then apply to life, and it's pretty vast in terms of how much ground it covers, as well, in terms of how much of life it can potentially deal with. It's not only just yourself or your personal happiness, or your work, or just your relationship with life and a higher power or something like that. But it definitely has a lot more. And I don't think that there's really an area of life that you could contemplate, really, that Scientology couldn't be applied to in some way. And it's really meant to be used in that light, in that if you've got some part of life that you're involved in, and that you would prefer that it was going better than it is, then the emphasis there is to study it and use it to make things better. And I guess that's kind of where I got into having a website, in that
Hmm.
I was already, I don't know, 10 years into my career. I started out as an engineer. I've been doing a lot of work as an internet systems engineer, basically ever since I finished high school, and then had kids. And then having kids is just, so the thing is about having kids is I wanted, I know some people can kind of get forced into it, like forced into having kids. Like all of a sudden you find out you had kids, and you're like, oh dear God, like I don't want to, this is not what I really would rather just go clubbing or whatever.
Hmm.
I I wanted to do it right. Like I wanted to really have nobody ever say that I was, um, not invested as a parent. I really wanted to do it right. And so that was, I guess, why I just said, good, well, it's Scientology has always been there for me for other things. Let's dig in and see what I can do better with, as a parent. And that is it. You're pretty much talking about all of life when you're talking about that, because just about everything ends up affecting your ability to parent. If that's a
Yeah.
super broad way of kind of introducing that.
Yeah, no, it works. That so when we're thinking in terms of, life in general, right? That I mean, that's a good point of Scientology just being vast in what it covers, right? So it's not there's maybe you'd say there's not a niche per se that it goes into, right? Where
Right.
I I remember not long ago I was at the org. There was a IAS event, and
Okay.
someone who he goes way back, right? They were talking about the Battle of Portland. I don't know anything about that, right? And he was part of that. He did the helped with all the designs on it and whatnot, and he was in the Sea Org, and he had mentioned that there's these archives where LRH gives advices on things. And to our people, LRH means L. Ron Hubbard. He's the founder of Scientology, and they had his input on designing, like city design, that they used for it, which is stuff that's not broadly published. It's more internal.
Yeah.
But to your point about how vast it is, it even goes broader, which
Yeah.
I found to be interesting.
Oh, totally. I could probably clarify a couple other things there too that you said. So
Yeah,
IAS is the International Association of Scientologists. That's the membership organization that
yeah,
supports Scientology, supports and advances Scientology internationally, and deals with things like our humanitarian programs, things that can't really be directly funded or dealt with just by just normal everyday member donations. It's things like if you want to get out, for example, anti-drug education literature, which we've got one of the most effective and far-reaching anti-drug
mhm,
education programs in the world. And to the point where we moved here, we're, like I said, 2 hours away from the nearest Church of Scientology. And my son is going to a public school here, and they had a whole module where they were learning about drugs, and it turns out it's the literature that we worked on. I mean, my wife and I even worked on this, where our pictures are we posed as models, as in one of the booklets when we were putting it all together. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm in the ecstasy booklet. I've not taken
All
ecstasy.
right. Were
You'll
you
see.
like
You ever look in there? You'll see my picture in there. But anyway, that's one of the things that the IAS funds.
were you a sober person or like?
I was very no. Okay, I've never taken any drugs in my life, but no, I definitely did my best to play somebody who was not. So
Got it.
yeah, yeah,
I'll have to look for it.
you'll see it. You'll see. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. We were younger then, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but in any case, yes. And then, but yes, but your point, yeah. There's advices and so forth, and that I guess kind of brings up an interesting point from the topic of a religion, in that and that one of the things that is pretty clearly delineated in Scientology is the difference between something that is part of the core, the religion itself, something that is policy that's meant to be applied broadly, policy that's meant to be applied to for a specific set of individuals, or just advice that somebody gave to somebody once. Because obviously he was Mr. Hubbard was running the Church of Scientology International for a while before he turned it over, and founded what's now called the Sea Organization, which is the religious organization that runs the church internationally. But he was running things before, so obviously he said a lot of things as a part of doing that, and definitely had a problem with people taking something that he said once in passing and applying that as, this is, he said this, and so this is the policy from here on out. And he would come back to some church sometime, a year later, and is like, dude, why are all the typewriters on the floor? Like, And then,
Yeah.
well, you said the typewriter doesn't belong on the desk. I said, yeah, that one doesn't belong on the desk. I didn't say always everybody should now type on the floor. Like, so it had to be delineated what was policy, what is advice, what is a comment, and make a relative seniority of this. There is actually a policy that delineates this. Like, okay, this type of issue is only valid for a year. This type of issue is broad policy that's valid for everybody, indefinitely. This is technical policy that has to do with how to apply Scientology in a counseling session or in a course room or something like that. So that sort of thing is kind of vital when it comes to trying to, if you've got, because one of the things about Scientology is you're meant to, like, you learn it and you do it exactly how it says. You learn why you're doing it and so forth, so that you're not just parroting something. But it's if you do it like this, it's Scientology. If you do it this plus a whole bunch of other things, then you're not applying Scientology anymore. You're doing your own invention. And but that's where it becomes important to be able to make a difference between and make a distinction between what is policy and what was a comment.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me, if you've ever seen The Life of Brian,
Yes.
that there's that sketch where the Blessed Are the Cheesemakers kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. It's a bit like that. So, but yeah. But that's. I think I interrupted you in the middle of something because we were clarifying words, and next thing you know, we're going down a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, no, it works. That we're talking about the drug programs, right?
Yep.
The anti-drug programs.
Yep.
And and that when you saw your material, was that news to you that the school district was using that?
It was totally news for me. And the thing is that my son knew that we had been involved because we've done a whole bunch of work with that. We've volunteered. I've spent a lot of time working on internet properties and all kinds of stuff, dealing with getting that stuff out there, both from a just one-on-one. My wife does a lot of, I'm good with technical stuff. That's just always been my thing. She's good one-on-one. She's really good one-on-one with people. And so, so she's doing a bunch of work with school resource officers who really just have a very difficult life in schools dealing with drug problems in schools. So my kids know that we've been involved in this. And so he came back, he's like, you know what I've been studying? Like he's got the,
yeah.
So,
showing the kids at his school, oh, look, there's my dad.
Yeah.
And they're like,
so they didn't get into the ecstasy booklet. They were talking marijuana and some of these other synthetics and so forth, which are rough. I mean, that's a problem. That's actually one of the reasons why we found ourselves out here. We used to be in Portland, and the drug problem was impacting us a bit personally. So
yeah, I've heard things about Portland that now there's, maybe we're far afield, but I've heard in Portland they've set aside areas specifically for doing drugs. Is that true?
So yeah, to an extent. I mean, the other thing about that is so in 2020 there was, and I don't want to get into politics because politics is really not my thing, 100%. But yeah, there was a measure in Portland, Measure 110, that passed that was basically, it was a decriminalization of hard drugs in an attempt to solve homelessness, which it is kind of a little bit of not entirely perfectly thought through and implemented set of solutions, and it really resulted. We lived on a bike path, and the bike paths were very heavily used as non-policed places where people could set up camp. So we had some incidents on our driveway that were definite security concerns for kids that we are trying. This is again one of these things that we're trying to do as not just as Scientologists, but as parents in general, is try to give our kids a lot of independence, because and you can't. It's tough to give people independence when there's legitimate security problems. You get drug users on the trains that they're taking into school and so forth.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And so we had mentioned the IAS, right?
Hmm.
And so all the programs, there's anti-drug, there's volunteer ministers, which kind of overlap with anti-drug. Uh,
Yeah.
are you familiar with volunteer ministers?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
have tried our hands on that quite a bit too. And I've got some good friends who are. I mean, one of my best friends, she is she's amazing, really. She's just a serial disaster response uh, responder. She's gone to something on the order of like 20 different major disasters all around the world,
Mhm.
and I mean, she's incredibly good at confronting, seeing what's going on, and then just doing what's needed to bring order to a scene. Because one of the things that happens when you have a major disaster is people are freaking out, and especially when you do something that has been stable for your whole life and then all it's blown over, and when you have first responders, and even some of the first responders are freaking out, then you kind of need help to just do whatever is needed to start organizing things and getting help where it's needed. And so um,
Mhm.
yeah, I've volunteered myself for things like that, and but a lot of my friends have found themselves on airplanes in Haiti or Bahamas, or even if as far
Mhm.
afield as Turkey and Greece and stuff like that when some of these things happen. So it's those guys are heroes. It's intense, and that's something that I've always felt ever since I was a kid. Is it's been really encouraged. It's one of these things where um, that's what it's as a kid, it's like who are the people who are pointed out as people to emulate, and it's people who go and are digging in and confronting things directly. Those are the people who are, you're told, like, check this guy out, that check this, like, look at this person who saw a problem and didn't want to sit around and wait for somebody else to deal with it, wanted to dig in and deal with it, whether it's drugs or morality, or dealing with criminals directly, or dealing with going directly and dealing with disaster scenarios and so forth. It's just that's just kind of what you're brought up with, as that's that's what to emulate. You want to be better at life so that you can actually confront things, because some people just, they're having a hard enough time just dealing with
Mhm.
life in general, to say, hey, well, how about you go and fly to the Dominican Republic because there was just a hurricane, and why don't you go and bring a chainsaw and see if you can fix it. That's a bit much. So if you have your own affairs in order, then you tend to be able to focus attention out a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, in terms of, you know, applying the tech, right? On so so for me, I've taken the course. There's the problems of work, right?
Yes.
How to get motivated, and I know there's a piece with undons. If you've heard of that,
Hmm.
let's say you don't want to do something, so you're like, okay, I'm going to return to this. I'm going to do this for a bit, right? But then uh, in the material it says, well, you should do it to completion, so you're not returning back, because all the stopping and starting is really gets in the way of your personal efficiency. So
Absolutely.
I'm kind of the person that will like say, I'm going to take a break from this. I'm going to do something else. All right, I'm going to do something else now, like leaving the undone there. Whereas, I found, actually doing it to completion, you're better off, right? That you'll have more time. Do you find
Absolutely.
that you've brought in things into your day to day life where, like, where do you apply the tech in terms
So
of easy?
it's
Yeah.
funny that, so there's a lot of places that I could mention that comes up. I would say, so the first thing, and probably one of the things that is most immediately intensely usable, and so you brought up the problems of work, which is really common as a first book, because if there's most if there's a thing that just about anybody does on a day-to-day basis who's an adult, is go to work. So if there's a thing that you're spending most of your waking hours at work trying to get stuff done, and
Hmm.
and you're effective or ineffective based on how good you are at that. And so that's got a lot of really simple solutions, and that's one of these things too that I feel that I can keep coming back to. And if there's one thing that, and this is, I've had people ask me like, what do you get out of this being a Scientologist thing? Like, what do you like about it? Like, one of the things is that a lot of this stuff is not something that you would apply once and it's got one layer to, or something like that. It's something that you can kind of keep coming back to as you increase your sphere of what you're working on. And just that, just things that are in that book, like completing an action where you start, change it, and stop it. You don't leave a bunch of things undone. There's a really fascinating datum called it's a principle called confusion in the stable datum, which
Hmm.
that whole book, by the way, is available for free online. So you look up the problems of work. It's actually a video. So
Hmm.
it's one of these things that I would really encourage. If I'm gonna talk about something here, but I would really encourage somebody to just go and just have a look at it, because it's powerful. It's wonderful. The whole idea of being able to pick out things when everything seems confusing, pick out something that you can handle and deal with that one, and then go on to the next one, and things will seem less confusing. If
Hmm.
there's something that happens a lot so right now I've got multiple contracts that I work on a daily basis. And there are big web systems. The field that I'm in involves the stability of web systems. So it goes in ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's all working and it's beautiful. And I look at all my graphs and they're all great, and it's great. And when a kid comes to talk to me, and I'm like, I got all this time, I can listen to
Hmm.
whatever you want to tell me about Legos or whatever, and it's cool. And then sometimes it's totally on fire, and I've got some senior vice president asking me when it's going to be back up, and he wants another update, even though I gave him an update 2 minutes ago, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it can get really hairy sometimes, right? And then I've got 3 kids, and they all have things going on, and so and then we've got stuff going on at home. We got renos happening with the house. There's like, if there's one thing that's happened as I've done more and more in Scientology, is that I've only simply expanded the number of things that are random and plates that are spinning.
Hmm.
And that's one of these things to keep coming back to. I mean, even just this morning, my wife and I were like, okay, we took on a new thing, got another home project that we're doing. I've got a big conference I went to last week, and another one I'm going to next week, and there's a bunch of stuff happening. So it's like to be able to step back at that, and use some of those principles to keep the confusion at bay. That's one thing. The other thing, which is something else that I find intensely effective about Scientology, is technology for communication and improving communication. And if there's one thing that I think that has made, I mean, I've been married for 20, or about to be 24 years, and we've been together for 25 and 26, gosh, something like that. And it's communication between the two of us, and constantly trying to not just keep it in, but make it better than it used to be, and putting continuous attention on that. And I think that is something that has been tremendously effective. I do for sure know that I have a better relationship with her right now than I had when we were 22. And that's, to me, that's a big deal. And I don't think that's something that a lot of people can say. So it's like, for stuff I could attribute to Scientology, I would attribute that. So that's definitely something and if you're going to try to keep a house together, then at least having that stability of a really solid, really good communication with your spouse, I think that's a big deal. I think that's a really big deal.
Yeah. And that maybe that's a good lead into the ARC triangle,
Sure.
right? Could you explain that, how that works?
Sure. So it's one of the fundamental principles in Scientology. And if you look at the symbol for Scientology, look at the S, and it's got 2 triangles on it. One of those triangles is the affinity, reality, and communication triangle. And it is an interrelationship between those three concepts. The concept of affinity, like how closely you want to be with somebody or something. Reality, like how real is something to you, and how much agreement do you have with that thing, and then communication is how willing are you to converse with it and talk with it, and those three things, you worsen one of them and the other two are going to get worse, and you better one of them and the other two are going to get better. They are a and the three of them together, they add up to understanding, but the three of them together, it's something that's one of these things that this is one of the things I dig a lot about Scientology is the interrelationship between concepts, and those three. It's just you're always figuring out new ways that, like, oh, that makes sense in another way that I wasn't thinking of. But it's also a way that you can find ways of improving relationships with anybody, whether you're talking about your kids or you're talking about parents or coworkers or potential business prospects or whatever it is. And that's something that does also just kind of form a fundamental backbone in Scientology.
Yeah. And so you had mentioned two triangles. What's the other triangle?
So the other one is that top triangle, which is knowledge, responsibility, and control. And those have a similar interrelationship. How much you know about something, how much responsibility you're willing to take for that thing, and how much you can, in fact, control it. And those three things, especially in fields of doing, things like being a good employee. Like, how much do you want to know about what's really going on with the company? I don't want to know how the sausage is made. Okay, good. So you're probably not going to be able to control much in that company. You're probably going to take very little responsibility for what's going on in that company if you don't want to know. But then you find out about more stuff. You find out more of how things work. You find out more problems that are going on. You go, okay, good. Well, I could do something about that, and then instantly you're taking more responsibility. So it's the interrelationship of those three.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. So we had mentioned what was it? The stable datum, confusion in the stable datum.
Sure.
I know Scientology ministers, they have a website. You can take Div 6 courses, but on miniature, essentially.
Yeah. Well, there. So yeah. So and just so folks know. So in a Scientology organization, you got there's a organization board that goes over everything, and that all the different parts of an organization. The part that deals with keeping people in the field active and also reaching out to new folks is the 6th division in that organization. And so a lot of times those courses that are designed for immediate application for anybody, if you're an old hand or you're new to the subject, we internally refer to those as Div 6 courses. But on the website, there is a bunch of those that are just available for free, and because those are also courses that a lot of times, they're for anybody to pick up and use. Also, we use them whenever we're taking on new volunteers to help out with things like even in a disaster response type of a thing. And those courses are used to bring people up to speed on all kinds of various things. But improving communication, improving your ability to plan things and organize, and deal with people who are having problems. Dealing with study is another thing. That's another thing that I've just found intensely useful. Is there's a whole technology around study and being able to debug yourself and get yourself able to learn any subject. So all these are useful. And but those ones are all there. Those basic courses are all available online and they're for free.
Yeah. So let's see that now. When it comes to applying the tech in terms of parenting specifically, right? Like, I've noticed, we talked about communication and acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
I think kids respond, especially well to acknowledgement because maybe they're used to not being acknowledged, right? That
It's true. It's true.
yeah, right?
But where I find it very interesting is kids dealing with each other. And it's very interesting whenever you're dealing with two kids and one kid feels like they're not being heard, it can get, I mean, yes, it can get almost to like, fist fight land. And I think most parents, especially when you got kids who are similar physically, you can get physical, because when communication isn't working, there's another form of communication that can be employed. But yeah, teaching kids to be able to both communicate so that they can be heard, but also to let the other individual know that, yeah, you were talking just now, and I heard what you were saying. I'm tracking. I don't agree, but I am listening. I totally heard you, sort of a thing. And I don't know. I just somehow, I was just mentioning this to my wife last night. Like goodness, I'm so, like, my kids, like, I heard them upstairs dealing with something, and they're talking
Mhm.
about something that they were constructing. They're whatever. My son's telling my little one how to make a stop motion video about Legos, and and I'm like, gosh, these guys communicate well. I'm so glad. This could have really turned out badly, but it turned out really well. So it's going okay right now.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Now, in terms of the Scientology auditing, have you taken any courses in auditing at all so far?
I have, and
Yeah.
been on the receipt end of a good bit of it myself, and my wife's a trained auditor as well. So auditing is
Mhm.
the whole counseling technique in Scientology, and I whatever, a few years back, I was audited to the state of clear, which is the major state which is mentioned in one of the first books, Dianetics, which is where an individual doesn't have, there's a part of the mind which is called the reactive mind. This is the one that's unconscious and is stimulated by pain and unconsciousness and so forth, and a lot of the crazy reactions you have to things that don't really make sense, ways that you react to something that don't make sense, um, fears that are irrelevant, silly ways that you communicate or have solved problems, or continue to shy away from things that don't make any sense. That's all reactive mind. And so there's a whole auditing program that basically leads up to that, because it's a bit to confront. A lot of times it deals with a lot of pain and a lot of really uncomfortable subjects that you got to talk about. And one of the things that Mr. Hubbard found kind of early on is that there's a subset of people who can just go in and just start talking about it right away. There's a lot of people who you've got other things that you've got to deal with in their life first before they're ready to confront that. I mean, you can just imagine that, like, okay, let's just say you're going to talk about something painful that happened. Like, let's say the guy was involved in a severe car accident, right? Or something like that, right? Maybe they're ready to talk about that. Maybe not. Maybe, and especially if they've got other things piled on in life. Like, let's say they are in the middle of an upset with their wife. You're not going to be talking about something that happened a long time ago if they're in the middle of an upset with their wife. So that's there's a whole program that you basically smooth out a lot of that before you end up really going in and confronting the reactive mind itself. And so and that whole thing was just fabulous.
Mhm.
I go on and on talking about that, because each one of those steps leading up to that has their own individual product and kind of end phenomena that you're going to be dealing with, and they have wonderful results that in like, you could say, well, I'm trying to go for that result of being clear, but the whole journey along the way is filled with all these unexpected amazingnesses of, like, it's a whole level that deals just with problems. And I'm sure you've seen people who just, you could tell them the solution to their problems, and they don't want to hear it.
Mhm.
They just want to they're just like, oh yeah, I can't, and they're, I can never afford blah blah blah. And you're like, dude, you just bought an Aston Martin. Like, you could sell it. Oh no, but I don't know what I'm doing. Like, they just got all these
Yeah.
problems that they have to have, and they're not willing to hear your solution. So there are people who need to have problems, and it really effectively deals with that communication, prior upsets, prior things that you may have done that you don't want to talk about, things like that you're, keeping, like maybe you're embarrassed about, nobody else cares, but you're embarrassed and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, if they ever found out that and then you're just sitting on that your whole life. And, why are you always scared to talk to people? Well, then they might find out about my, that thing that and it's like, nobody cares, but okay. But it's, you get that stuff unburdened, and it can result in a lot of good stuff in your life.
Yeah, that what is there? There's like there I forget the terms, but there's something release, right? And then the next one is something else release, right?
Yep. Yep.
Now, do they ask different auditing questions based off of like the that tier on based on problems? Like, what's
Yes.
a problem you could never confront, or would that be a type of question that they would ask?
Yeah. So yeah, and each one of those levels, not only do they have a specific set of questions and routines and things that you're going through, but there's in many cases there are techniques and skills as an auditor that go along with that as well, and things that you need to be ready for and know how to handle. And in some cases too, you'll be asking about one particular area of life, and then something else will come up. It'll remind them of something else, and then you'll be in the soup because of something, like whatever. It'll remind them of some you're talking about some other problem, and all of a sudden you're reminded of some terrible drill sergeant when you were in the army, and then next thing you know, the person's all wound up. You got to be able to figure out ways of unsticking it if it goes wrong. And so a lot of the techniques that were developed over the years really were to make it not just so that it would work in if everything's going right and smoothly, but also it will continue to work if you run into a snag, or let's just say the auditor, messed up somewhere along the way and needs to get corrected, and then you're going to need to go back and fix it. And that is a lot of the reason why you have an organization there. And it's not just, hey, let's just put all the books out there and have at it, like, see what happens, go hurt yourself, sort of a thing. Because a lot of times you need to be able to you need to deliver the auditing, but also be able to have people who are there, who are supervising it and saying, oh, well, looks like we missed something when we were going through. Let's go back. Good. Now that that's all dusted up. Good. That's perfect. Good. Now let's move along. You have somebody who's behind the counselor, going not behind physically, but working with the counselor as a supervisor for the case. And that's Scientology. It's called a case supervisor, and they're moving it all along. And then you even have somebody behind that person who's making sure that the program that was put there for the person is the right one, that nothing was missed, that it's all being done in a way that's going to get a result. And that's where I've got a lot of great people in my family, but like my sister, who is really just kind of a guardian angel for me. She's just the most wonderful individual ever. But she's a senior case supervisor, and she's in the Sea Org at Flag, which is in Clearwater, Florida. And that's her job is to oversee cases and to be trained enough to see when something's going wrong and to fix it, and to see what things are going right and to point those out. And it's amazing that the sorts of results, you see people who are really having a rough time in life go in and they come out shining and ready to tackle life. And it's all that skill and acumen that kind of goes into that. And it's nice to have really a technology that is well enough taped out, and routes that are well enough taped out that you can be pretty certain that you can go in there, and as long as you show up and you're like, good, let's handle this, then you can come out the other end.
And now, when we think of auditing, we might see, or we might visualize the e-meter, right? That on a lot of the commercials, they have the auditing session, somebody holding the cans, though the majority of it doesn't have the e-meter. Is that right?
I don't know. I don't know if I would say majority, but so you do have auditing that is done without an e-meter, and you have auditing that's done with one, and the whole point of an e-meter is because a lot of times you might have, let's say you ask somebody a question, any old question, right? And it's designed to get a person. Let's just say you're going to ask somebody, you know, let's just say you're talking about something that maybe that the person has done, or let's say you're talking about something that may have been painful in the past, or something like that, right? If you're trying to get and talk about something and get it all the way done to a point where the person no longer has attention on that, and it is at a position of cause rather than effect on that area of their life, you're going to want to talk about things that are actually for real bugging the person and not just the one that comes up. Because sometimes somebody might say, okay, well, have you ever done something? And you might go, oh yeah, there was this, yeah, it was my teacher. She was so mean. And the guy doesn't care about his teacher. He has no problem with his teacher. It's not the thing. But maybe there's something else that he thought of and just going whoop and skipped right past and said, rather we don't talk about that. And that kind of thing will show up on the e-meter. And then the auditor can direct attention at that thing, and then you can get it addressed. Because it feels wonderful when you address the right thing, and it feels, like nothing when you address the wrong thing. It's like, good, well, we didn't do anything interesting if you address the wrong thing. So a lot of auditing where you're dealing with things that are in the person's memories and that the person's thinking of and so forth, that most of the time is going to be done with an e-meter. There's also auditing that's done with the person's relationship to his environment. And there's a whole just massive book full of processes that are done with a person's relationship to his environment. Those are called objective processes. And there's a whole lineup of those that you can go through, which is called the survival rundown. And that's all done not on the e-meter. It's done twinned. So you have a partner that you do it with, and you get each other through them. You audit this guy, and then he turns around, he audits you, and you get through the program, the whole battery of different processes that you end up getting through. And that is its own separate thing, and it's a prerequisite to a lot of the metered auditing that you do is to do that, and it's a wonderful thing. I could go on and on talking about that particular activity and its relationship to parenting, because that's one that if there's one thing that I found that the most gain on, it's being able to really be there when you're with your kids. And there's so many gradients to that statement of how there are you, or are you still stuck in something else?
Yeah. Now, with the survival rundown, that's since it's a requisite for the metered auditing. Is that to say that in order to reach clear, you have to do the survival rundown?
Yeah, that'd be an accurate statement for the most part. I mean, like, again, every individual in Scientology, there's no like blanket, like, here's what everybody does. Everybody does this sort of a thing. There's not, because every single person is an individual and they're treated individually, and you get a program individually of what you're going to be doing. So I can't say everybody for everything is what everybody does, because everybody is individual. They've had their own track record of things that they've done and things that they need help with, and who they are and so forth. And, it's going to be done. But for the most part, by and large, everybody does it. Yes.
Got it. And so, like, as you're, reaching these release points or stages, right? You could probably call them stages. Like, do you notice that it's gradual? Or is that to say, like, you're a release and then you're kind of maybe abruptly at the next level, that's where that starts up again?
So yeah, and this term of a release in Scientology, you've got this, you've got things that are a problem. Like, let's just say, like, just as an example of things in life, like, let's say you are having a big upset with a friend, and then you deal with it. Maybe it's not permanently handled, and all upsets that you're ever having of a similar nature are all gone, but that upset is done. Then that upset that was almost palpable around you is now dissipated and has moved off. That's the idea of a release. The as you're moving up, and so in Scientology and auditing, there's a gradation chart of these states, and it's a gradient that one normally does as you're handling each one of the things one after the other, and it's basically usually it's funny how it works in that a lot of times when you're handling one of these things and you handle something, let's just say you handle let's just say you handle one thing all the way, communication all the way, or you handle your ability to communicate, or ability to not have problems, or the fact that you're no longer really concerned about all of the misdeeds that you've done in the past or something like that. Generally, it's kind of funny that you end up like really almost running into some of the phenomena that's handled on the next one. But if that answers your question at all.
Yeah, no, I sort of, where you're kind of, what do we want to say? Kind of what you've done in the previous stages, you've kind of started to unravel,
Yeah.
and then you kind of reach that in the next one, essentially.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because I mean, obviously, so I'm on Twitter a lot, and you deal with all types on Twitter. Sometimes you have people who are, I mean, luckily we have more characters that we can type these days. It's not just 140. It's really hard to have a nuanced conversation with 140 characters. Somebody's like, well, tell me, what's it all about? And you're like, bud, I got 140 characters to try to summarize an entire religious belief system. Like, give me a second. They're like, well, why are you linking me to your blog? And I'm like, because I have this much to say. You were going to make me say it in little chunklets. So it's tough. But in talking to folks, it's sometimes we talk about like what's so in Scientology you have these different actions that you do one after the next, and it's a gradient. And I've had people try to say, well, this is like just arbitrary levels. Is this like oh, I'm a level 4 mage. This is not, it's like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Like it's no. It's not, these aren't just arbitrary, oh, I'm a 5 now or something like that. It's like, it's not that. Each one of these are their own specific thing that's done that you wouldn't want to do the next thing until you got this thing handled. Like as an example, let's just take the first 2 steps that are on this grade chart. So when somebody first comes in, one of the first things that gets handled is there's something called the purification rundown, which the whole idea of that is to set somebody up so that they can confront their life without the effects of drugs and chemicals and so forth. Because if you have somebody, and this is unfortunately all the more prevalent in today's society where drugs are so rampant, and it's not just street drugs; it's everything else. It's all the whatever. Just there's so many substances that people are constantly putting in their bodies that it's difficult. We've got somebody who's just, even let's just take one that's legal everywhere, like alcohol, right? Alcohol is a can be a powerful, it can be a hallucinogen. It can be all kinds of things with enough, so you got somebody who's a constant drunk. You're gonna have a hard time saying, okay, good, let's talk about your relationships right now. And the guy's still, not even sober yet. So the whole idea is to get that, so that it's no longer affecting the person. The person is able to think clearly and move on to the next thing. Like if you're just going to take and walk them around and do objective processes in life, you're not going to even want to do that if the person's still sitting there in a fog of, after 5 years of being a heavy marijuana user. So it's and anything else you do in Scientology is not going to stick. So you're not going to have the expected result unless you have that out of the way first. So each one of those steps, they're not going to be successful unless the previous one is done all the way completely and you're ready to move on. So it's not these are far from being arbitrary, just insignias or something like that you would or status symbols or something like that. Like really nobody cares. Like they're not it has nothing to do with anything. It's not like the status of that is like, okay, great. Like I'm like what's cool about them is what you confronted, because for any one of those things, it's really cool. You take somebody who was really wound up about stuff that they were doing and stuff in their past, and now they're not wound up about that. The difference before and after, when you just talk to somebody, it's and they're just you can see it in their space of just like relief. It's like it's all good. They're fine now. And whereas before they were wound up and might bark at you, if you looked at them funny or something like that. Like that sort of thing is cool. And that is in terms of what do Scientologists put attention on, or like when we're talking to each other about stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that we would validate, and it doesn't have anything to do with a level or a name or something like that. It's the coolness of being able to get through that. So
Yeah, and you've already said the status of each level doesn't matter and whatnot, but so you've reached clear, right? And now there's steps above that.
sure.
Have you done any of that, or?
I haven't. I'm working toward that right now.
Mhm.
Told you my I don't have a church that's nearby me, but what I do have is I have what is sometimes a $40 flight to take me down to Clearwater. So it's a direct flight. So and I've got my mom is down there and my sister's down there. So I'm down in Clearwater often, working on some of my next steps, and it's been a wonderful thing. And I get family time while I'm down there as well. I'm a
Yeah.
Four Seasons guy. I grew up in New England, so I wouldn't be able to live in Florida. That would be nearly unthinkable. I need mountains and I need Four Seasons. So where I am right now, I'm literally on a mountain. I live on
All right.
Lookout Mountain, so it's so I get a little bit of that. I get my mountain biking. I get all that kind of stuff. It was 24 degrees this morning, so I get like proper weather. But
Mhm.
it's still easily accessible.
Yeah. Do you have snow on the ground in Georgia?
No. We got a little bit of snow this year. We got some good freezes. It got down to single digits a couple times, but so it was like it was more properly cold than I was expecting. I mean, I grew up in New England, like I said, and
Mhm.
so nothing, no real I don't know where are you at?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I thought I heard that in your accent. So yeah. It's not Minnesota weather. I went there for business, and it was somehow, I don't know why, but it was in February, and I had my ski balaclava in my
Mhm.
bag. I don't know why I had it, but I had my balaclava and my ski goggles, and luckily I did, because it was 15 below and blowing. And so I finally got to my hotel and I was ready, because everybody wants to complain about the weather wherever you go,
Mhm.
right? That's just like a common thread, that everybody likes to complain about the weather. And I got in there and nobody in Minnesota wanted to complain about the weather. I got in there and I'm like ready to talk about how awful it is. And the guy's like, hey, a little breezy, huh? I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
You know.
I guess this is how it is here.
No, yeah, it is where they say I was in Las Vegas, and they can tell the people that kind of live further north because it'll be 50 degrees or whatnot, and they'll be wearing shorts
That's right.
because
That's right.
it's not cold until you're really below zero, right?
No, that's
Anything
right.
above that, yeah.
Yeah.
That just today, I was talking with a colleague of mine, and she said that her favorite season was winter. And I asked her, "Don't you live in South Carolina?" And I said, "You don't have winter there, right? That it's like it gets to be around 50 degrees," she said, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, so you like fall, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah.
yeah, I definitely I'm a Four Seasons person. I like having four equally spaced seasons. We have our summer's a little long here, but it's close enough. It's close enough to real Four Seasons. If it's going to get single digits, then that qualifies as winter, no matter where you are. That's still, that's winter. And we get a real fall, we get a real spring, so it's all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. But back to what I was saying. So yeah, I spend a bit of time down doing working on my next services. So yeah, it's on to the upper stuff after clear. That's next for me. My wife also just went clear this past December, so it was really wonderful for her. And yeah, it's kind of funny. We immediately after that we've got, there's always more things, and just like every time when we think we're handling a lot of things, we do a couple more things in Scientology, and the next thing you know, we're handling even more things, and it, it's it's
Mhm.
it's just getting more random. But
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah, that's kind of how life works.
yep.
That the reward for a job well done is more work. Yeah.
It's true. It's true, actually.
Um,
Yeah.
so you'd mentioned that your mother is in Clearwater.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah, and is she part of the golden age of admin deal?
She's not. So my mother is. She works at. So there's a couple areas of the church there, but she works in. She works as a. She really works mostly with other. So she's a Sea Org member as well. She has been for about 24 years, 23 years, something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, so she works with other auditors and so forth, and make sure that they're good at their job, basically. And helps organize things, and make sure everything's kind of humming well. She's a trained auditor herself. And so she does all kinds of stuff down there. So yeah, so she's there. My dad, so she and my dad are not together, but my dad's in DC, and he also works for the church. He works the church in DC, and he's an auditor. And that was one of our other reasons to move over here, is that we get to see them more often, because making the trip all the way out to Portland when everybody else is on the East Coast, we're the weirdos that were on the West Coast.
Mhm.
So now there's, I got these easy direct flights down to Clearwater, and easy direct flights to DCA to bring him down. He's also an electrician, so whenever I need help in my house, I'm like, "Hey, Dad, why don't you come on down and help me wire a sub panel for my garage?" So yeah, so
Yeah. So both your parents are in the Sea Org.
no, so my
Mhm.
mom is in the Sea Org. My dad is a church staff member, which
Got
which
it.
is yeah, which is separate.
Got it. And now, so Sea Org, all you do is uh, working for Scientology, right?
That's
And
right.
then when you're a staff member, maybe you have another job, but you for sure have.
It's more akin to a job. It's more akin to just because in that it's not it's not a religious order. You work for the church, and yes, fine, if you want to also do other things, like my dad, he still does electrical work on the side too, just because he can. He's a master electrician, so
Mhm.
it's one of these things that's always in demand. But yeah, he lives in a house in the DC area, and he's got a bunch of cats, and he lives and does his thing. And my mom and my sister are in the Sea Org, and that is their life is pretty flat out. It's rewarding, it's intense, but it's definitely rewarding. But they love it.
Got it. So the Sea Org, for anybody that's not terribly familiar, that's like, how would I mean, you said it's pretty intense, and you described it as a religious order.
That's right.
Yeah. That, I mean, like, you see them, they're dressed in almost like Navy uniforms, yeah.
I mean, they do have uniforms,
Yeah.
and it is so the when the organization was first formed. So originally, the church headquarters was in England, at St. Hill Manor in England, which is about, I don't know, whatever, 40 miles south of London, and in East Grinstead. And when LRH was working out, like, good, how is this all going to work for Scientology to be managed worldwide, and also the care and the care of and delivery of the upper levels of Scientology? How is this going to work? And a lot of that was worked out while he was, because he was previously a master mariner. It's already licensed to captain a ship of any tonnage on any sea. So they set up on ships. And so there's a big ship called the Apollo, which was everything was all set up on originally there. And so the people that were brought in who joined this organization it was originally all on sea, and they've kind of maintained that nautical tradition. So a lot of, even though
Mhm.
the vast majority of what's happening in the Sea Org is all happening on land at this point, they've still maintained that as a tradition.
Yeah. And now, so now there's the free winds, right? Whereas previously there was the Apollo. Now
That's right.
the Apollo, I'd imagine it's just conked out, and that's what
No.
happened.
It actually, what happened is it got too small, because
Got it.
initially the Apollo was both the management organization of Scientology internationally, plus the upper levels of Scientology were also delivered on the Apollo, plus the training of executives around the world was also delivered on the Apollo. So when you started out, it was like, okay, good, this, and we're getting things off the ground. That was fine. But as it grew, it was just a completely different scale was needed, which was where the management of the church moved to Los Angeles, and so and that was all moved into. There's a building in Hollywood, which is where church management is located, and then the whole technical delivery facet of what was happening, that whole organization of what was happening on the Apollo, that was moved to Clearwater, Florida. So flag management went to LA. The flag service organization, which is where all those upper levels of Scientology were delivered, that is now in Clearwater, Florida, and that became the flag land base, and that has just continued to basically just it's a concern that originally just was all in the Fort Harrison building, which was a hotel that was purchased, that was there, that was served as a hotel and a delivery area, but then that became too small, and so they got another building for training, and then that became too small, and they got another one for the advanced organization, and that whole thing became too small. So they built a massive new building, which is called the Flag Building, which is this. It's a pretty big thing, and it's completely from the ground up, purpose built for all the things that are needed there. So you're not trying to shoehorn all the functions that are getting done into a space that was originally supposed to be a hotel or something like that. You've got a building that was purpose built from the ground up to house those functions, and so as a result, it's great taking services there. It's because it's just everything flows one thing to the next, and all the spaces are meant for it, and there's enough room to get everything done. But
Yeah.
but that's go ahead.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that at one point everything, all the services were delivered in the Fort Harrison. Is that right? Except, I mean,
At
that
one point,
even
everything.
OT levels, the whole shebang.
That was the building that was bought. So eventually they purchased the Sandcastle building, which is where the upper level were all moved over there, and so that was done. It was used as both a hotel and a service organization, but then that got too small, so they built an addition onto that. And but yeah, all the rest of the training was, everything was delivered in the Fort Harrison. The training, that whole training activity totally outgrew that space. So they got another building, which is called the Coachman Building, which is near kind of the downtown of Clearwater, and then that also outgrew that. So that building that was previously all for people coming in to get trained, that's now just purely for staff training, because now they have enough staff where they're just training the staff. They need a massive building for that. So and that's not even for trainees from other churches around the world that come in for training.
Yeah. And then, so you'd mentioned the the management that's in Hollywood. We're talking Hollywood, California.
That's right.
Got it. So yeah, you'd wonder that. Uh, did they ever say a reason why it's in Hollywood and not in Clearwater with, the rest of everything? Or
Well, I mean, when you look at it, there's like in terms of like things that would need to get done and so forth. Like so, Clearwater is a wonderful place to come to as a retreat. Like if you just want to, if you want
Mhm.
weather that is really agreeable for a lot of people, and you want to just like you wouldn't necessarily. I mean, no shade to where either of us are from, but I wouldn't set up a retreat in coastal Maine where I'm from, because the only time where the weather's nice, the bugs are atrocious, so nobody would come.
Mhm.
So it's like you gotta set it up in some place where people would come, and Florida's, it's beautiful there. Um, but conversely, there's not a lot else happening there in terms of if you wanted to talk to people, if you wanted to ship things places, if you wanted to be able to have people come in and out, if you wanted to like really just be on lines of communication that you need to be able to get things done. You want something a little bit more cosmopolitan, and so your choices. I mean, your choices there. If you're talking about the U.S., you're talking about New York or L.A. for the most part, and L.A. was chosen. So in terms of other things that went into that, I'm sure there's a lot, but it served its purpose well.
Got it. Yeah. So, all right. So we have Clearwater. Now, in terms of the services and the different levels, are you familiar at all with how the OT levels work?
I mean,
Or
to an extent, yes, but in terms of like what are the things that you are confronting and auditing on each one of those? That's something that isn't. I mean, there's a reason that those are for the most part
Mhm.
confidential, and the reason why those are kept the way they are is because you're talking about things that again like I was referring to earlier when you're talking about a gradient. And
Right.
if there are most of what you're talking about and auditing and confronting and so forth leading up to the level of clear, there's nothing really wrong with having somebody study all about that and learn what they're going to be confronting and dealing with and so forth. But above that, that was what was found is that these are things that when you're ready for it, it's all going to make sense, and you're going to get something out of it. But if you go and you have no familiarity with it, and you just read a couple of things, it'll just be like trying to read read and make sense of and decide and have an opinion on a calculus textbook when you've never taken any basic arithmetic. It'll just look like, wow, this looks crazy. Yeah, and I don't even know what any of it means. So as a result
Mhm.
of that, that's what you don't want to have people not knowing what any of it means and saying, oh well, I guess and end up going the wrong way. So
Mhm.
that's what if that makes any sense. I don't know if that analogy
No, yeah,
100%
for
works,
sure.
but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that somewhat I mean, if you're familiar with Westworld, the HBO series, how
To an extent,
season
I haven't
three,
watched it, but I know at least enough
yeah,
of the storyline.
yeah, that they just like season three, they just put you right in the middle of it with no context
Mm-hmm.
between what happened between two and three. So it's just like, what am I even watching? What's even going on? This seems like a totally
Right,
different show, right? Where
right,
there's the same characters, but what are they doing? So, I mean,
right.
I loved the show, but I gave up on it because I'm like, what's going
Yeah,
on here? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
When then
exactly.
they try to fill in the gradient after, so you're supposed to kind of be like, what's even going on here? But
Yeah,
it makes it a bit hard.
yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of that. I mean, that's a lot of what I spend a lot of time talking through just when I'm dealing with things online, because there are there are those people out there that profit, not just with respect to Scientology, but with respect to almost any subject. They profit upon engendering misunderstanding and making people have a problem with somebody else because outrage sells. Let's just say, so you're not talking about Scientology, you're talking about being a Mormon, being whatever. It's like, you could say, I like my religion because this, and I'm super happy. And that's like going to be the worst headline ever. Nobody's going to buy that newspaper because conflict and blood and gore and sex and, all that kind of stuff that totally sells newspapers. Doesn't make it moral, but it's what sells newspapers. So there are folks that profit heavily and continuously on misinformation and out of context. Like, oh, I heard this about Scientology. We're like, okay, that's 100% out of context. A, doesn't work like that. B, doesn't mean anything. And C, do you have time for a nuanced discussion? Because I can tell you what it really is. So it's like this never ending. It never really ends, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to be trying to sell something, and the job of trying to clarify with boring facts what really is happening is I'm glad I'm doing it, but it's like one of these kind of just like, it's never like, I could never have a website that makes me money, as an example, to handling boring facts, because that's just, I go, oh, I could tell you the story about that. It's a lot more boring than you think. So, and it's not, and so, yeah, but it's what I do.
Yeah, no, I can kind of relate to that with, there's, one of my, axes I grind is on mythicism, the idea that Jesus never existed, right? Which I mean, historically, yeah, there is a guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the mythicists will kind of throw out, kind of salacious, out of context things that would make it appear as if scholars don't believe that, right? So,
Right.
I mean, and it's more salacious to kind of throw out these zingers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Than give like the boring facts that make it really not that relevant, right?
Right.
And the broader
Right.
context that's actually boring. So
Yeah. And
yeah, no, I can see
luckily you have like podcast listeners who probably thrive on boring facts. So it's a good audience. Like, if you talk about like other, there's actually a lot of good podcasts out there and YouTube shows. Like you ever listen to Religion for Breakfast?
Yes, yeah.
He's fabulous. And it's
what's his name?
great,
Dr. Henry.
Yeah.
What's his?
And wow, no, I just forgot. And now he's now he's not gonna like that I follow him on Twitter. But anyway, yeah, no, his stuff's great. It's boring in the best way, and because it's just a bunch of facts, and it just yeah, it's so there is that out there, and there are people, luckily, who are interested in the nuance, and it's just like, oh, tell me how it really works. All right, I get that it's not that weird thing that people were talking about, so tell me how it really works, and so at least you have those out there that are willing to wade through that don't just want don't just want the zingers.
Yeah, but to your point, the clickbaity stuff, right, with the whole kind of ancient aliens type stuff, like throw out a crazy, like, do the Anunnaki live among us?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's going to be clicked over the real dating of the Didache, right? An obscure Christian, relatively obscure Christian text, right? Where people are, that's not going to be done as much. So yeah, they are kind of what we could term merchants of chaos, and that. So we do see it everywhere, like YouTube or on headlines where I'd click on it and it's not the actual thing that they're reporting on. They they twisted the headline to make it more salacious than it actually is,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating too. So because I deal with a lot of this internet infrastructure work, right? And so there's a piece of gear that sits in front of a lot of major websites, and it's used for A/B testing, which is where you test two different things, like a picture, a headline, a pull quote, something like that, and or even a way that it's written, or a button size, things like that, to see
Hmm.
whether or not one thing will perform better than another. If you're trying to sell tents at REI or something like that, then you're going to want to test a lot of this stuff A/B and find out which one works, and then promote the one that works better. What's really fascinating is that you go to some place like CNN, and let's say the
Hmm.
web's run a little slow, and you see their A/B test flip, and it shows you one headline and one just totally outrageous, like totally buzzy, millions die, type of a
Hmm.
headline, and then it flips you to the other one, which is a completely different one, which is equally inflammatory. You're like, you jerks, like, like you just get the idea of the copywriters who are back there just going, okay, which one of these is going to perform well, because they're paid on ad impressions. They're not paid on accuracy, or how does it portray this vulnerable minority population or something like that. That's not what pays the salary.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. For the title for this episode should be Tad Reeves talks about millions dead. I
That's
think
right.
that would probably
That's
be
right.
good because
That's right. That's right. That's I mean, and you could pull the quotes out. You can make it true. But
yeah,
yeah,
there it is. So yeah, in terms of, let's see where we want to wind down at. Is there anything that we didn't cover that we should touch on?
I don't know. I mean, I think we covered a lot of good solid ground, and I'm always looking for more questions. So if you ever if you come up with some more afterwards, and fire them my way, and I'll I'm always looking for fodder, writing prompts and so forth. But but yeah, it's been great. I love having sensible, curious discussions. It's really funny too,
Mhm.
because you're obviously a scholar, and some of the best interviews I've ever had and conducted and so forth are with students, because as opposed to like a reporter type interviewer where you're just trying to get zingers, they're like genuinely curious, and they're just trying to just like they don't want to be convinced of one thing or another. They just want to you just tell me, good. So what's that about? All right. Oh, well, that's kind of weird. Cool. Do you believe that? And they just ask questions. They're just genuinely curious. They turn out to be some of the best things. But yeah, I really appreciate your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, maybe we'll leave it there, and yeah, we'll leave it open. Maybe doing it again sometime. It was fun.
Awesome. All right, good. Well, thanks, Elliot.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Thanks so much, and thanks everybody for watching.